Welcome to the One Stiletto in the Grave podcast with your hosts, Sonny Ormond and Jane James.
Well, hello everyone. We have a murderous and mysterious show for you today. It would be a crime not to share it. Jamie investigates while Sonny delves for clues, and our great entrepreneur Joy Swift MBE reveals the inspirational story of how she created the world-famous and award-winning murder mystery weekends. Oh, yes, and spills the beans on the little pink buzzing bunny. Naughty!
Hello everyone and welcome to One Stiletto in the Grave. Hello Sonny.
Hello Janie.
How are you doing?
I'm all right, actually. I'm okay.
Good.
And yeah, have you had a good morning?
I've had a wonderful morning and I'm looking forward very much to today because we are interviewing a guest who is an expert on murders. And that got us thinking, didn't it, about whether there have been any murders in Ambridge. I think that Tom Forrest is the one that I can remember because he shot one of the Larkins. I think it was Bob.
Really?
And yeah. And there was a court case, but they did him for manslaughter, not murder. And he got away with it. And then, wasn't Prue married to Bob Larkin, who he'd shot, and then Tom Forrest ended up marrying her, which is why I suspect it probably was a murder that he got away with. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's true, because I was also beginning to, ponder on this in the Archers and the near murders, the near misses. And it got me thinking about Mark Hebden, all
Mark
those years
Hebden.
ago, of course, who collided, I think, with a tree, didn't he, in a car? And I think that was because... dear Sarah Coward, who was playing Caroline Bone at the time, was riding along in her horse. I think a car overtook him. He avoided Caroline Bone on her horse and then slammed into a tree and was killed. But I don't think we ever found out, did we, who drove the car which drove him off the road?
No, I don't think we ever did.
No. So that's an unsolved murder, isn't it, really?
Perhaps that was Tom Forrest as well. Perhaps he's a serial murderer. Who can tell? I mean, the Archers Anarchists, of which I'm a member, although they'll probably drum me out now after doing this podcast, suspect there have been many, many, many more murders, including Shula doing away with Doris and Lizzie doing away with Dan, and possibly even Lillian doing away with Ralph Bellamy. But
oh, really? Oh, that'd be a good storyline.
It would, wouldn't it?
Maybe not. Let's not suggest
Maybe
that.
not. No, you're not.
No,
Maybe not. We don't want Lillian banged up in chokey, do we?
No, we don't. We want many more episodes. Thank you.
So as I said, our guest today is, I would say, the Queen of Crime. She runs murder mystery weekends and has been doing so, oh God, Joy, you'll tell me if I've got this right or wrong, since the early 1980s. And she is Joy Swift MBE. Hello, Joy.
Thank you.
It's really, really lovely to see you.
It's great to be here.
So, is it the early 80s that you started?
Can we just do the
I
introduction
invented the whole
again?
concept.
Hang on.
Oh, sorry, hang
Guys.
on.
Hi guys, sorry, can
We
we
need
just
to
do the
stop.
introduction again? Just because I thought
Yeah.
we were doing about 5 minutes and then we suddenly just went into it, so that's fine. But can we just do the introduction again, just because Joy was muted?
Okay, what do you want me to say? I've forgotten what I said. Do you want me to go from Queen of Crimey bit?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think a lot of
forgot what I
Agatha
said.
Christie people will be fed up with that because she's known the Queen of Crime, but I have been called the Queen of Murder in the press.
All right, I'll call you Queen of Murder then. Right, the Murdering Queen. All right then, Jake, ready when you are.
Yeah, all good.
So, our guest today, I'm very, very excited to introduce Joy Swift MBE, the Queen of Murders, who organises and has done since I think the early 1980s murder mystery weekends all over the country and all over the world, I think. Hello, Joy.
Hi.
It's really great to see you. Am I right? Was it the early 80s when you came up with this?
Yeah, I invented the concept of interactive murders in 1981, and it was the very first one we did was Halloween, which seemed appropriate. But my bosses weren't impressed when I came up with the idea at all. I was working for a small chain of hotels and responsible for getting bums in beds, as they used to call it, in PR marketing. And I heard about a sort of real murder in the plaza, and I thought, oh gosh, that would be awful for publicity. And then in a 20-minute journey, the light bulb went on, and I thought, actually, for the people that are there, they couldn't leave because they'd be witnesses. And then the light bulb went on, and I thought, wouldn't it be great to be dropped into an Agatha Christie type film and be able to ask all the questions and interrogate the suspects and look at the evidence? And within 20 minutes, I'd come up with the idea, and I told my boss, and he wasn't impressed at all. So I went over his head and told the chairman, and he said, "Oh, I think that's a good idea. Oh, go ahead, work on it." So I worked on it for about 6 months, and we did it at a hotel called the Prince of Wales in Southport. And I contacted the local local regional paper, which is called the Liverpool Echo, and I said, "Do you want to come down on Sunday and take some photos of guests sort of looking shocked at a body?" And which they did, and it went on the Monday. It was in the Post and Echo. And I took the Monday off because I knew I'd be quite tired, and I went in to work on the Tuesday morning, and the telephonist, because we had telephonists then, said, "You're going to be busy today." And I said, "Why?" And she said, "You'll see when you get to your desk." And it was just covered in messages. Would I ring the Daily Mail? Would I ring the New York Times? Would I ring the BBC holiday programme? Would I ring ABC News in America? It was ridiculous. I hadn't even planned another one. I just thought it was going to be a one-off. And of course I rang them. They all wanted to come and film the next one, which I hadn't planned. And that was the beginning of the end of my life as I knew it. And 40 years later, I'm still doing it.
Wow, what a story, Joy. I mean, that's fantastic. Thank God for that chairman.
Yes.
Because you might just have let it go, mightn't you?
Absolutely.
Well, certainly at that stage.
Well,
anyway.
no, he probably doesn't like me very much because I left. And when the BBC holiday producer came, he said to me, "Joy, if I were you, I'd go on my own, because once this goes out everywhere, it's going to take off, and particularly when it's on the BBC holiday programme." So I sort of took a big risk. I was only 24, and I thought, and I did it. I don't know why, because I wouldn't be brave enough to do it now. It's the ridiculousness of youth, I think. You think you can do anything.
Absolutely.
And that was it.
God,
So-
that's quite a story, isn't it?
It is quite a story. So I'm really interested. You said it took you about 6 months. You had the idea, which is brilliant, but it took you about 6 months, because it must be really complex, isn't it? The workings out, or was it something that just sort of fell into place for you?
Well, I didn't actually think it through when I came up with the idea. And it was only, I went to a local amateur dramatics and got some actors, and then I found a local crime writer and asked him to write a plot, which I have to say wasn't brilliant. It was a bit simplistic. And we had several meetings with the actors, and we worked it all through, and we did it. And I think we had about 40 or 50 people. I put an advert in a sort of magazine, a book magazine. And we got about 40 or 50, and they all arrived, and we did our thing, and just full of disasters. But pretty much it was what I wanted it to be, because I thought the characters have to be really believable for people to be invested in them. And I wanted it to be realistic, because I thought if it's just a case of looking at a few clues and not being realistic, it wouldn't be like being dropped in an Agatha Christie, which was my sort of vision. And so I realised straight away that it had potential, and obviously the next one was much better. I didn't realise until the first crime writer's draft came through, and I thought, ooh. And I worked with the actors, and we made it much better. And it wasn't until later on that I realised, actually, I write a pretty mean plot. And I suppose for the last 30 years, I've been writing 90% of the plot, and then I write it, and it's a lot of it's very themed, as Jane will know. There's either a theme to it or a code to it or whatever, but I write it all. And then, of course, when we perform it for the first time with the actors, they sort of put the flesh on the bones of the characters that I've created. And even though I know that I want there to be a row about such and such at 12 o'clock or at lunchtime, when the characters become immersed in their character, then they start saying things, and it sort of, as I say, puts the flesh on the characters. And over the years, we've had so many funny things happen with the characters, and funny things that they say, because it's all improvised. I've written the sort of the basis of what it should be, but every weekend it's different because they're all improvising. And so some things have been amazing. I've got some funny stories. It depends when this is going out, though, because some are quite rude. Anyway,
That's all right. We
like
do rude.
We like
But
rude.
before we have the rude stories, maybe just explain what happens on a murder weekend.
Yes.
So if I
Okay.
book on a murder weekend, what happens?
Okay, so a month before, over the year, I write 3 brand new plots. So I'm actually writing my 147th at the moment. And each plot has a theme to it because, as I say, I wanted it to be realistic. So I wanted people to book, but before they arrive, I wanted them to sort of understand why they're there, why there are 70 or 80 virtual strangers in a hotel. So each plot has a theme to it, and for ease of explanation, let's say it's a wedding. So I will write a letter a month before to all of the guests saying, you've been invited as guests of Tracy and Sean, and then I'll give a little bit of bump about them. So then I ask the guests to pretend that they're either on Tracy's side or Sean's side or whatever. And so when the guests arrive for the welcome reception at 8 o'clock on Friday, already they're dressed for the wedding supper or whatever it is, and already they've got something to talk about. And for that reason, Jane will know, it's incredibly sociable.
It is.
You get a lot of couples, a lot of groups of 4 or 6, and they know each other, but they all immediately are talking to everybody else, why you're here, who do you know, etc. And so the characters, of which there will be 9 or 10 usually, when they arrive and announce that they are Tracy or they're Sean or they're the father of the bride or whatever, immediately people sort of know them. It's particularly good for single people because immediately they're sort of grabbed in and they feel part of it. So the theme sort of is chatted about, and then we have a welcome reception, and then we go into dinner. And everybody's talking about the themes. So over the years, I've had such a variety of themes. And the one that we're doing next in the winter is going to be called 15. And it's a TV production company that have done a sort of a thing around the country. Have you ever had a 15 minutes of fame? Which most people have. So at the reception, everybody's going to be telling their stories about how they had their 15 minutes of fame. And one thing I immediately thought of, we had a guest, I don't know, a few years ago, and he had been really struck by lightning. And he showed me the scar on his hand. He was playing golf and it went up the golf shaft. And he was telling us about it. And I sort of thought, everybody's got a story, even if you're 5 and you're in a picture in the paper at nursery school or whatever. So that's the one coming up. But anyway, that's the theme. And everybody's talking about the theme until shock horror, usually round about coffee, can be earlier, a murder occurs. And it's one of the actors, so it's somebody they will have met, so it could be the father of the bride or whatever. And so then you go from worrying about the theme to then becoming sleuths. And so everybody then has things to talk about. What did they see? Who did they see this person talking to? And so Friday night is very busy, just everybody learning about the characters and what's going on. The police arrive. The murders, as Jane will know, can be various and intriguing and crazy. Some are quite simple. On the last plot, ostensibly when I died on Friday, it looked like a heart attack. And the police didn't arrive, and the guests were like, what's going on? There's no police. But then they arrived much later to say that the ambulance has seen there was corrosion on my mouth and I must have ingested cyanide, which is a very old-fashioned murder, but it was an old-fashioned sort of plot. So then they turn into sleuths after the first murder. The police arrive and everybody's got something to talk about. After dinner, we always have a themed game because I learned early on if we're just sort of talking about murder and it's all a bit serious, it would be a bit heavy. So whatever the theme is, I do games related to it. And it's also a very good way of getting people to bond. So if you're on a table of 10 or 11, you all play as a team. So we might have a wall quiz that might be, if it say it was a wedding, it would be themed to love and marriage. And over the weekend, we have a few games, which are just, some are fun, some are intellectual-ish type quizzes. But it's a way of just lightening the mood and getting people to talk. So then we go to bed, and when they go to bed, underneath their door they'll get a clue sheet. And these are famous quotes that are from, I don't know, Shakespeare, Billy Connolly, whoever. But it's a way of getting people to start thinking about plot themes, lines, rows between families, this sort of thing. So we come down to breakfast on Saturday morning, and then we start getting fired with, have you ever had a baby that you gave away, or whatever it is? You know, all these sort of random questions. But that's been sort of sparked off by the clue sheets they get. Then during breakfast, the police have set up a police incident room, and it starts off with maybe 10 pieces of evidence. And by Saturday night, we'll probably have about 60 pieces of evidence. That builds up over the day. And at the end of the day, that forms the jigsaw that can help you solve the plot. So after breakfast, everybody goes into the incident room. Then we have lunch. And over lunch, there will be bits of evidence that have gone up that are bound to cause trouble. And there are guests that love causing trouble. So say there's a husband and wife who are happily married, apparently, but there will be a letter from a lover, and the lover happens to be there, and the guests will find this letter and go over in front of the husband and wife and say, I know that your husband's having an affair with so-and-so. And so over lunch, there are lots of rows when revelations start coming out. And then Saturday afternoon, we play a couple more games. There'll be another murder. Then Saturday night, we always have a fancy dress. So say it was, the theme was love and marriage, then it would be come as famous couples, maybe. So everything's all themed to the theme of the weekend, but then the plot is something almost completely different, because the plots, I've had such a variety of themes. I was about to tell you one that's on the online ones, but I won't. Anyway, I've rabbited enough, but that gives you a brief idea of how it all happens, which was your question.
I've been on
Yes, I know you have.
quite a few, and they're so entertaining. You just sort of leave the world from Friday evening till Sunday lunchtime when the police get the guests and the surviving characters together and go through the whole denouement of, was it you? No, but it can't have been you because it was you, but no, it can't have been you. And then the murderer is arrested. The big reveal. It's incredibly entertaining.
You were just saying you enter the hotel on a Friday and you leave on a Sunday.
Yeah.
Somebody once called it a golden bubble. And I said it actually is, because no matter what's going on in the world, you don't watch the news, you don't get involved. But I have two examples, if you'd like to hear them, of really profound. I didn't realise until I heard this stories, and it's making out for me to sound marvellous, but it's true. One was, it came out Saturday lunchtime that somebody had been raped, and this girl took me to one side and said, can I talk to you out of character, which we never normally do, but I could see she was quite upset. And I said, sure. Anyway, we went into a private room and she said to me, I was raped when I was younger and nobody knows. Not even my friends that I'm with this weekend know about it. And she said, I don't think I can stay. I think I'll have to go. So I said to her, look, hang on a minute, because he certainly gets his comeuppance. And there's a bit of stuff happening that I think might actually resonate with you and might help a little bit. I said, I may be totally wrong, and if you want to go, please do. Anyway, so she did stay, because I think she was more worried about telling her friends about why she wanted to leave. Anyway, I was watching her very carefully over the afternoon, and all of these things happened, and then of course the chap got killed. And I was watching her very carefully. I could see her really relaxing and lightening up, etc. And she came up to me on the Sunday when it was all over and took me to one side and she said, I can't thank you enough. And I said, why? And she said, we stayed up till 4 a.m. and I told my friends. And she said it was the best thing that's ever happened. And I was in tears because I thought, oh my God, I didn't realise that we could really make a difference. There's another story. We had a group of 12 women. I didn't know why they were all friends, but they all arrived. and they had the best time, and they were laughing and dancing and having a great time. And on the Sunday, they all came up and said, "Oh, that was brilliant, thank you very much." And I said, "Oh, were you all at school together, or, you know, are you all mums of kids at school, or how do you all know each other?" And she said, "No, we're all part of a breast cancer group." And I said, "Oh, blimey." I said, "Well, you all are obviously very fit and healthy, and you've all come through it." And this one woman said, "Oh, somebody we know won't be here next time, but we'll all be back," because she was terminal. And I thought, they've had the best time. They've had such a wonderful weekend where they have literally stepped into the golden bubble and been able to forget everything that was going on in their lives. So somebody once said to me, "You should be prescribed on the NHS." And I think, yeah. Actually.
Yeah.
No, that's brilliant, Joy. And I guess also, I mean, those are wonderful stories, but I guess also friendships will have been formed, won't they? You know, deep friendships from
We've had guests
these
that
weekends.
came either on their own or as couples, and now they come regularly as a group of 8 or a group of 10 because they've met and bonded on the weekend.
Yeah, no, brilliant. Just jumping, because I want to hear some funny stories, and we are we are on the podcast sort of site known as Explicit, so you can say whatever you want is the thing when we get to funny stories, so that's really not a problem. But what I was going to say, as an actor, just very briefly going off in a slightly different direction, I'm just interested in how much your actors are briefed, so that they each must have quite a big backstory. Is that right? So how much time do you spend rehearsing with them before you launch?
Well, it's funny because people say, "Oh, you must rehearse for ages," and actually we never rehearse.
Really?
No. So most of the actors who are with me have been with me for years, and they're very good at it. And not wanting to diminish actors per se, they don't get lines, and actors very much. Some people, as you know, there are some that have really no personality, but then they get their lines and they totally become the character. And I sort of go in reverse, because quite often I approach people that have been on a weekend because I just know they'll be brilliant. Yeah. Because firstly, you need to be very, very sociable. You need to be easily talk to people. And the second thing, you have to be really, really bright, because the plots are very complex. You need to understand and remember a lot about who you are. Yeah. And they will get on the email, they'll get about 20 pages of notes. We never rehearse. What we do is we meet at 6:30 on a Friday, and we're down with the guests at 8 o'clock, but we go through the character details, we go through the timetable for that night, and then we have 3 more meetings during the day on Saturday, and this time they know their characters. We don't talk about them again, but we go through the clues that are going up and the rows that are going to come from those clues. And, you know, it's a well tried and well formulated plan, the way it works. And people say, "Oh, on Saturday night, I wish we had dinner earlier." And I'm like, the actors have had half an hour off, then they're back in a meeting. It's very full on for the actors. But yeah, it works really well. And they just love it because of the improvisation. And the reason you have to be really bright and very quick is that you will get fired questions.
Absolutely.
That come left field, that you could have done the plot 5 times and never been asked this question. And all of a sudden you get a question and your mind's whizzing, thinking, "Oh my God." And they'll say, "Oh, what's so-and-so's got a cousin that so-and-so died. What's his surname? We only know him as Jack." And you're thinking, "Oh my God, we haven't planned a surname for him." And you're trying frantically to think of all the other surnames of all the characters so that you don't, and inevitably you say the same one, and then they'll say, "Oh, is he related to so-and-so?" And you're thinking, "Oh no." So you're on your toes for 2.5 days.
Really. I mean, have you had any actors who've come and said, "Oh, Joy, I think I've said the wrong thing. Oh my goodness, I think that."
Yeah,
yes,
and that's the golden rule.
Yeah.
You have to come and tell me, and that's in the rules. Because if you come and tell me, we can sort it out. Yeah. We can work around it, and we can sort of work it so that it works and it's fine. Yeah. But the trouble is when they don't, and then it just blows up and blows up and blows up, and then you're thinking, "Oh, this has got out of hand."
Out of hand, yeah, no, that's great. Yeah.
So when you're, because these are run in hotels, aren't they?
Well, they are now because I've pared back, but we used to do cruises and we did them abroad. We did Death on the Nile and all sorts of things.
Wow.
But wherever you're doing them, there are people, say it's in a hotel, there are people staying in the hotel who aren't on the murder weekend.
Oh, yes.
We've
got lots of stories of that.
Tell us. That must cause you a bit of excitement.
Well, I've learnt over the years that it's best that they know. So when ordinary guests arrive, they get a letter explaining that there is a murder weekend going on. We're very careful where we put bodies so that they won't be found inadvertently by a bride or a groom. But in actual fact, we have been asked to be in wedding albums, to be a bride and a groom stepping over a body looking shocked. But we try very hard to sort of keep ourselves contained. But over the years, things haven't gone according to plan. And I remember one, must have been, 25 years ago. We were in Salisbury and there was a body on the stairs. And I'd done a really good job on them. The makeup was great and it looked like they'd virtually been sliced down the middle. And, with the aid of sausages and blood and all sorts of stuff that I used to aid looking gruesome. And all the blood and everything. And anyway, the body was there waiting. Somebody was upstairs waiting to make sure that nobody found them. There wasn't anybody downstairs. And a doctor checked in. Late arrival, because he'd flown in from Germany. And so he went up to his room and found the body and was trying to save the body's life. And I'm trying to say to somebody that only speaks German, I only speak English, and I'm trying to explain it's all stage makeup, which he realised fairly quickly. But initially, he was determined to save that body's life.
Oh, my goodness, that's a brilliant story. It's hysterical.
Well, I know we were on one where there was a fire alarm. I think down in Brighton, one of the very first ones we went
in the middle of the night.
In the middle of the night. We were convinced that you'd done this as part of the plot. Absolutely bonkers. That's how you get so caught up in it. But I know that must give you a problem because you've got to smuggle out people who are meant to be dead.
Well, there's another rule with that. Stay in your room until I find out whether it's real or not. And if I find it, we'll get you out. But yeah, you don't want bodies wandering around. But for that particular one, I remember it well. And we did have to get them out and the fire engines were there. And so they were under duvets and taken the opposite side to where the guests all met. So anybody walking along the road seeing somebody hiding under a duvet, it's just madness. It's madness, really, when I look back at all the things that have happened. It's crazy.
So I guess then when in normal circumstances, when there aren't fire alarms, but, one of the actors has died, how do you get them out? At dead of night or something like that in normal circumstances?
No, if it's a Friday death, generally I cast people that are close. Right. And so when all the guests have been and viewed the body and they're all called back and the police are there interrogating them, generally we can get them out quite quickly. If it's a Friday afternoon or a Saturday night death, they usually stay and then they're confined to quarters, obviously, because they can't be wandering around. Although we did have an actor, he only did one, and he realised he hadn't packed his toothbrush. Yeah, he realised he hadn't packed his toothbrush, so he came wandering down to see if anybody had got a spare toothbrush. No. So that, I was not happy. He never did another one because I thought, he just doesn't get this.
No, absolutely. God,
bizarre. So, go on, give us some of your funny stories then about things that have happened.
Oh, there've been so many. I'll give you a couple of not rude ones first. Ones that just made me really laugh. So the first one, I remember we were in Windermere and at the Old England, which is right on the lake, and there's a jetty that goes out. And we're all sitting having dinner on Friday night, and all of a sudden we saw a waiter running along the jetty, followed by the chef with a knife. And the waiter jumped into Windermere, and everybody's very excited because they're thinking, oh, that's part of it, and it's a bit faulty towers. No, that was the chef that had lost it completely and was going to kill the waiter. And it was, I'm watching it thinking, how am I going to explain this? Because had he stabbed him, people would still have been taking notes and saying, what's his name?
And you can imagine the mix-up with real police arriving and your police. You can imagine the confusion, because that's brilliant.
Absolutely. I mean, once we used to, in the early days, have St John's ambulances arrive, and I'd pay them for charity, and they'd be round the corner. And once an ambulance arrived, and I sent it away, and I said, no, you're too early, go. And it turned out there was a wedding next door in the function room, and a woman had fallen over and had broken her hip. And the ambulance was for the woman that had broken her hip. And I said, no, go away, you're too early. One of my favourite guest stories, and this was amazing. I can't remember what the actual fancy dress was, but somebody had come full-blown noddy. And so he'd got the whole outfit, he'd got the hat with the bell, and he'd got his little rosy cheeks and everything. Mm-hmm. I don't know what possessed him, but there was another wedding, and he joined the lineup. And all of the wedding guests were going into the wedding, shaking everybody's hands, starting with nodding. I just thought, what on earth do they think he is, that he would be the first person in the lineup of the wedding? So that's sort of guest stories, but we've had some very, very funny stories. One of my favourites is when I died on Friday night, and there were about 80 guests, and I can't remember where we were, but there was a big terrace outside, and I sort of everybody was inside having their dinner, and I sort of staggered along, and I was really quite bloody, and I banged on the door, and they collapsed on the terrace. So everybody rushes out, and there's a big hoo-ha, and oh my God, and then I heard one of the actresses shout, oh, get Tracy, and I'm thinking, I'm lying there sort of fading away, thinking, who's Tracy? And then the character said, oh, I was sitting next to Tracy, she's a nurse. So it was like, oh, great, I hope she doesn't interfere with me. Anyway, so everybody's going, get Tracy, and eventually Tracy comes, and I hear Tracy whispering to the actor, I'm no use, I'm a sexual health nurse. So inwardly, I'm sort of laughing, thinking, yeah, you won't be any use here. And the character, the actress, said, no, you'll know what to do. You've got to help her. And so she knelt down beside me, and I'm girding, literally biting my cheek because I know something's going to happen. So she knelt down beside me, and she went, how's your vagina? Now, how I didn't laugh at that point, I have no idea. But all of the guests were laughing their heads off because they thought it was so funny. It was ridiculous. Another one. Do you remember Sheila, Jane?
Yeah, I do remember Sheila.
Sheila was one of my absolute favourite actresses. She was mad as a box of frogs, but just wonderful. She now lives in Lanzarote. She moved about 20 years ago. But she was brilliant with the guests. She made up wonderful stories, and she was fabulous, and a bit eccentric, loads of white hair and caftans and stuff. Anyway, the plot was the Friday night, it was a memorial for her son, and we're all gathered there for the will reading over these ashes on a table. And anyway, it turned out at the will reading she was absolutely livid because this chap had left everything to his gay lover. So on Saturday lunchtime, there's a massive row, and she's saying, you shouldn't have everything, and I hate you, blah, blah, blah. And very loudly in front of 80 guests, she shouted, you're just a leech. You've been sucking him dry for years. Now, we all knew she meant bleeding him dry for years. She got her, which in the context of the gay lover was
bless her.
accurate. My last favourite one with an actress was recently, actually, and one of the actresses was playing a prostitute, and she had a big bag that she took everywhere with her for emergency business, and in it was what I think most ladies would know is a pink rabbit. Mm-hmm. So the pink rabbit is, can we say?
Yeah.
Oh, dildo. And then there's two like little, they call it a rabbit, I think, because of these two little ears. Anyway, she'd been walking around all weekend with this rabbit in her bag, and occasionally, to much hilarity, the rabbit would go off and there'd be a buzzing coming from her handbag. And she was quite sort of bohemian and wore a lot of bracelets and stuff. So end of the weekend, we all said goodbye and we all drove our separate ways, and she went onto the motorway services to fill up. And she went into the service station to pay, and she put her hand in her bag to get her credit cards out, and her bracelets caught on the rabbit's ears, and the rabbit flew across the counter to a very confused young lad who looked and saw it flying across the counter. So then her quandary is, do I ask for it back or do I run? And she asked for it back, and he had to hand it back.
Oh, funny.
Isn't it brilliant?
Run,
And
rabbit,
when
run,
she
rabbit,
told
run.
us, we just thought only in the murder weekend world could things like this happen, I'm sure.
God, that's hysterical, isn't it?
Brilliant.
Amazing.
Yeah,
So,
brilliant.
I mean, you've got this fantastic business, and then when COVID struck,
Ugh.
that must have been really bad news.
It was awful. We did our last murder weekend on, I think, March the 6th to the 8th. And then I think we went into lockdown the following week. And I was sort of a bit blasé about it. I thought, oh, well, a couple of months off, that'd be quite nice. And then we'll go back and everything will be fine. And of course, 18 months later, we hadn't gone back. And we didn't perform our first weekend, I think, till the July the following year. So I knew that I was, like many people in the hospitality business and entertainment business, I sort of felt I was dead in the water. And then Jerry, who's my right-hand angel, you know, we were talking about what we were going to do on Zoom because Jerry was now at home. And 10 years before, I had done an online game for my guests. And we thought that's the only thing we can do is we'll have to try and do something online. And so after a lot of organising and a lot of Zoom calls, gathering people in, and a lot of hard work, actually working harder than I've ever worked, we produced the first of what is now known as MMI, which stands for Murder Mystery Investigations. And it was very successful. A lot of people played it, but only our guests. So a lot of our guests played it, but I didn't have any money to sort of advertise it. And so only our guests played, but loved it. But then we started working on it. And when we realised that lockdown was going to be a very long-term thing, then we decided to do a second one. And even more successful, even better. And this time we got professional reviews from America that were absolutely glowing, saying this is better than anything out there. You know, one person said over lockdown I've played 15 sort of murder mystery games and this is unparalleled. And so the reviews were amazing. Then last New Year's Eve we won an award in America. Again, People's Choice Best Online Game. So that has convinced me we've actually really got to go for it now. So rather than just keeping it as a guilty pleasure for our guests, I've got some money out of my house, sadly, but I've got some money. I saw a documentary about Cameron McIntosh, and it said that nobody would back cats. So Andrew Lloyd Webber had to put up his house to get cats on the stage. And I thought, right, if Andrew Lloyd Webber can do it, I can do it. And so we're putting serious money behind advertising it, hopefully around the world, and hopefully now hundreds of thousands of people will see how brilliant it is. So we're just at the moment working the next one. So Cold Case 3, we hope, will be out again Halloween. It's a lot more complicated than a plot. So on a plot you may have 60 clues. On the online game, on each of the cases there's about 150. but I've written them in chapters, so chapter 1, chapter 2. But you also have videos of live action, of police interviews, and the police discussing their evidence. And, you know, I have a whole wall of evidence that in total comes to about 150 clues. And people play it, binge watch it, and they'll play it in sort of 10 or 12 hours. And some people just play it chapter by chapter once a week. I mean, in lockdown, we had people playing it with friends in America, in Australia, and they'd meet up for a couple of hours every weekend and play it with their friends abroad. And the plots I'm really pleased with. I've taken original plots that I've written, but made them much, much bigger, so more bodies, more suspects. And I'm really proud of what I've done. And considering that, you know, I'm so much older than I was before, I think, oh, I've still got it in me, really.
You should be proud because they are spectacularly good.
Thank you.
And I think that, you know, what you said is really interesting, isn't it? That you started a business when you're in your 20s and you've now started a new business in your, well, I'm sure you're in your 40s or something now. But, you know, you started a new business later in life.
I know, it's
I get my pension in October, so I feel like I'm Barbara Cartland, that I'm, you know, going to be writing till I'm 90.
But that's brilliant, and it's such, you know, you are a typical entrepreneurial personality. And I mean, it is when you said, you know, well, you know, your house, you put your house, that actually this is what an awful lot of entrepreneurs do, don't they? It's about risk, and it's about going with that. And I mean, I just think it's amazing. Something that I'm just telling the listener, we have our lovely producer here, and something that he just wants me to ask you here is, have you tried virtual reality murder mysteries? This is Jake who's just asked
Yes,
this.
well, we actually had a meeting with somebody about doing it as an app. Right. But of course, then you're talking about selling Andrew Lloyd Webber's house rather than my house, because it's so expensive to do. And yes, we've talked about virtual reality, and yes, it would be wonderful. So if you've got a listener out there with a whole ton of money that they want to invest, we'd love to do that, and it would be spectacular. When we were talking to the app people, they showed us something, and it was amazing. And you could put your phone onto such and such a mode, and you could lift the body and put the body onto a table, and then you could search the pockets for things, and it was just outstanding.
Wow, yeah.
But again, incredibly expensive.
Yeah.
Now I hope that Murder Mystery Online that we've done, the Murder Mystery Investigations, I hope it does look expensive, but actually it was all just done almost on a wing and a prayer and love. So to go from that level up to doing apps and virtual reality. I mean, I have got another thing which my fingers are permanently crossed at the moment. But during lockdown, I got an agent, and she's got some publishers interested, because I have some plots that I know would make amazing films. There's one that I just know is Oscar winning. I just know it in my heart. And so I'm hoping that some of my plots will be seen around the world when we get a publisher and maybe a TV or film company interested. But I have a body of work that is bigger, far more than Agatha Christie. I mean, she's got trillions of sales. I haven't, but I've got 147 plots in a locked, secure place that can all be turned into books and films. And so one day, I hope I'm not too old to enjoy it.
Well, it's I tell you what I'm interested in. You say I've got all these plots now, which is fantastic. But you know, was it something that you had stories in your head as a child? I mean, I know you because you went to university, you did other things. You were a designer, I think. That was your degree, was it? Well, so did you have all these plots? Is it just something that's developed? I suppose is what I'm asking.
I think so.
I mean, had that facility.
When I was young, I was a great storyteller, my parents tell me.
Right.
That I was a spectacular liar, apparently. But when I was about 10, 11, I did get into Agatha Christie, and then I became very keen on Nio Marsh.
She's great.
She's fantastic. And I read all of those by the time I was about 15. And so I think I always enjoyed it, but didn't know I had the skill myself.
Yes.
And I've only come up with the skill because I've had to, because of doing what I do. And, you know, the actors say I'm quite spooky because I often write things that then do happen. So they think I'm a bit of a witch as well. That's happened on more than one occasion.
Really? What have you written that's happened?
Well, I think the reason it happens is that I don't read books anymore. I just can't because my memory's so bad. And I don't want to spend 2 weeks writing something and then the actors say, well, that's exactly the same as. So my only research is newspapers, and I buy from the top to the lowest, and I cut out little cuttings of things that, that'll be interesting, and that's something about a school. If I write a plot about a school, that'll be good. And one that comes straight to mind is that I saw a really small article about, I can't remember what it was called then, but it didn't have the official name, but it was mad cow disease, and it ended up being called Jacob something disease.
Yeah.
And they'd found that the hormones from the cows had gone into people with growth problems. And it was the pituitary gland that had been affected. So I wrote a plot about a funeral home, and they were illegally removing bits of people, including the pituitary glands, and they were being used in growth hormone treatment. Anyway, the plot was fine and all good, and the first weekend we did it, on the Sunday, on the front of the Nationals, it said mad cow's disease has moved into humans. And the actors were saying, Joy, that's all your fault. But it often happens that I'll write about something in a plot and then it'll happen. There are loads of instances, they've all gone from my mind, but that will always stick in my mind because it was so bizarre. It was so left field.
In the ether, and you managed,
Yeah.
Well, I guess you because you digest so much news, you're probably subconsciously processing it at a level that most of us don't, aren't you?
Absolutely.
Well, unfortunately, at the moment, it's too depressing to.
Isn't it?
Yeah, it's really.
It is.
And that's,
it is.
yeah. I mean, I try not to write about, economic problems. That won't be in the new plot I'm writing now, because I try and get people into the golden bubble and away from it rather than,
That's it, and that's why all the stuff you're doing on the internet, it's great, isn't it? From that point of view, it's just taking people out. And are you back actually doing the live shows?
Yeah,
as well,
we
in
started.
hotels?
We got exactly a year ago, last July. We started back, and actually, they've been limping along. To be fair, I think last year people were worried about getting COVID, and obviously we couldn't do what we do behind masks. So the numbers weren't brilliant last year. The same with January because we had the new variant, and I think people again were worried. And then the summer's not been good because I think people have been taking all their backed up holidays and their backed up weddings. So people had very full summers. However, the great news is the winter's nearly full.
Excellent.
The winter's back to pre-pandemic, thank heavens.
Oh, that's great.
No, that's brilliant.
You must have stayed in hundreds of hotels in your time. What do you think makes a good hotel?
Oh, gosh. If there's anybody out there that wants a really good project manager for hotels, because there isn't anything I know about them, what makes a really good hotel more than anything is the staff, for sure. I've met amazing ops people, amazing GMs, and then I've met really terrible ones. So firstly, the right people. And I could staff the best hotel in the world because I know so many people around the place. And then, nowadays, I would say sustainability. I mean, we've got a new hotel that we're using, and they're marvellous because everything's locally grown. They're really, really conscious of their carbon footprint. And I think that's important now that people are really beginning, unfortunately probably too late, but they're really getting on board with it. I love quirky decor because so many of them seem to be done by the same people, so they all look very samey. I'd love to win the lottery and have my own hotel. That would be amazing.
That would. I can imagine you would manage it really, really well.
Yeah.
So, have you noticed, given that you started effectively 2 new businesses, do you notice any difference, or has it affected you the way that women in business are treated? Were you taken seriously when you were in your 20s?
Oh, don't get me started.
Oh no, let's get you started.
We want to get you started, please.
Am I allowed to name names and shames? Banks have been terrible through the pandemic. My bank particularly has been appalling. I wrote to the financial ombudsman. I've written 3 times now, but I've been now told I've got to write a personal letter because the business is one thing, but it's the way it's affected me personally. They don't care. They don't care. They've got their list of rules, what they can and can't do. And I've been with this bank for 50 years, 10 years before I started the business. I don't have any contact at all. It's just appalling. So yeah, banks have been bad. As far as being a woman is concerned, I'm not so sure that I've ever seen any difference, really, to be honest. I think I'm nicer than with staff in hotels than a man would probably be, because they really can let you down badly by getting things wrong. And I'm always very calm, and I'm very, now let's sort it out, and if we can sort it out today, everybody will have forgotten. And I can imagine, say, conference organiser just lifting off the roof. So I hope that I have a good reputation of being nice to work with. And so I don't think the man thing really, but certainly HMRC, banks and everything, just incompetence rules okay. And for a small business person like me to spend virtually a week with 2 of us just on the phone trying to sort their messes out, it's just awful. So yeah.
It's very stressful as well, isn't it?
Very stressful. And, poor old Jerry, I've nearly gone off the deep end, and she's like, no, that's not the way to deal with it. Let's just stay calm and sort it out. When I'm just ranting and raving, throwing chairs around the office because of the way they are treating us, yeah. So, yeah, it's the big corporations I don't like.
Interesting. Interesting. So, where do people find, if they want to book a murder weekend, which I'm sure everybody does now, where do they go to find out more?
Well, our website for murder weekends couldn't be simpler. It's murder.co.uk.
Oh, that's murder.co.uk.
Straightforward and to the point.
Yeah, nobody can forget that one. And then murdermysteryinvestigations.com is the site for the online games.
Right.
And we're just changing things at the moment. I would say wait till September, because the functionality, it's there now, but it's going to be even better in the middle of September when we've made the changes we're making. But not to the plots. The 2 plots are exactly the same. It's just the way you move around the site and everything is better.
Right.
But what's good about it, and so many people have said we love this, is that you can play it anytime, anywhere. So you can play it on your phone, on your tablet, you can play it on your PC, and you can, when you're just waiting for the bus or whatever, you can think, oh, I've just had a thought, so you can jot it down on the notebook. And people said they literally were thinking things for a week and making notes when they were shopping and stuff. So yeah, I'm very proud of it. I think it's really good.
No, it's brilliant. It's brilliant. It's so clever as well to have made that journey out of necessity initially because of COVID, but there's a whole new world now, isn't there, opening up for you? Which is just brilliant. I'm going to have a look at this because I have to confess, many years ago, because one of the things that I did when I was trying to earn a crust, I became a tour guide and I worked for this particular company, and she started to do murder weekends, obviously, much after you did. It wasn't anything that like you're describing, I have to say, but and I did a little bit of that, and it was great fun. I mean, I have to say, but it wasn't as organised as yours. But no, I just take my hat off to you. I mean, I just think it's absolutely,
Thank you.
terrific. And I think we should bring this back into Ambridge. I think there's a hotel in Ambridge which is the Grey Gables, and it's being refurbished at the minute. And I think maybe one of the things that we should suggest.
Oh well, I'll be there.
Yes, I think
I'll bring one of my pots to Ambridge.
As our guest, I think.
Definitely.
Fantastic. That would be wonderful.
Definitely. Well, the question that we often finish off with our guests is what would you say to your younger self?
Whoa. Oh, blimey. Don't eat so much. don't stress so much, because usually it comes out all right in the end, but you worry and worry and worry and don't change the outcome. So I think, don't worry so much. Don't you lose all your loved ones as early. That's been tough. My father died when I was 13. And not so long, 20 years ago, my mum died, and then my sister died. And I've sort of lost my family, a bit of an orphan almost. And so that changed my life, I think, fundamentally, my father dying at 13. But I think the most important thing is probably don't worry so much, because it will come out in the wash.
That's really, really, really good advice. And thank you so much for giving up
You're
your
very
time.
welcome.
You're an inspiration, Joy. You really, really
thank
are.
you.
Really,
Good
really
luck
are.
with everything. Really.
Thank you. Well, I've enjoyed it thoroughly. Thank you.
That's our pleasure. And everybody, I've done both Murder Weekends and the online games, and I can thoroughly recommend both of them. So get yourselves off to those various websites and sign up.
Thanks,
Okay,
Jane.
thank you so much, Joy. Well, Sunny, that was
What
fantastic stories.
Actually, it really is, and it's about bravery, isn't it? It's about risking things, and you do have to be brave to do that. And I suppose it's bravery, but it's doing the right thing, at the right time, and a complete inspiration. And having to suddenly change tack, because you have to change tack, because that's what the world, has created, as it were. No, brilliant.
I think so. To start a second business, approaching state pension age, that's totally inspirational.
Well, I'm going to look online, and I'm going to find that murder thing online. I'm going to
Good stuff. Well,
I am.
I don't know about you, but I could murder a cup of tea.
Oh, very good. Oh, darling, you're so witty. Well, I could make a stab at the washing up, couldn't I? There we go. There's a laugh. There's a laugh for Joy's
There's
friend.
the laugh.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Take care. Lots
See
of
you
love.
soon.
Mwah.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks for listening to our One Stiletto